Battlefield seed, it looks like, and nice opener for him. He's got no 2-drop and kind of no 1-drop.
He'd love to have, obviously, a way to get on the board early, but Shock is certainly a card that's not dead at all in this matchup against, Hero Precinct 1 based strategies. So,
Okay.
lands and spells, copy of Experimental Frenzy, he's happy to keep.
Drop would be really nice here, and there it is! Viashino Pyromancer, perfect draw here.
We've talked about before, that's the way to make the Hall of Fame, ladies and gentlemen. you make sure to find that 2-drop right about there.
You'd know.
And one thing we didn't talk about in the pregame, but it is a factor, is the mana base of these 3-color decks, right? Occasionally you're going to have to pay 2 life to have a land come into the battlefield untapped, which is a pretty big liability against decks that have as much reach as mono red in the form of burn.
And look at this. Brad Nelson knows exactly what's up. He's going to Thought Erasure here and take away Experimental Frenzy. That is the card that he's worried about. That leaves the way clear for Seth, just with the cards in his hand, to fire off a Chain Whirler or go for a Light Up the Stage plus something else. So he knows he's going to take a hit here, and he did it anyway.
Yeah, and really cool, Brad got to get to some significant value out of that Thought Erasure. He gets rid of the Experimental Frenzy. He gets to see Seth's hand, notices the Shock in it, and then he actually surveils a Hero Precinct 1 into the graveyard. Normally a card you'd really want, so an incredible amount of value there for Brad.
Yeah, also he knew with the Oath of Kaya that he had in his hand, he would be able to take care of the Chain Whirler anyway. So you can see how Brad is playing 1 to 2 turns ahead and seeing everything, playing around the Shock by getting rid of what would normally be a pretty desirable Hero of Precinct 1, and also leaving his opponent with the spells that he can answer and taking away the ones that he can't. Just really nice sequencing here from Brad. And look at this. Seth Manfield says, "Welp, let's get Light Up the Stage going and see what he can find." Shock to the face, and wow. Not only nothing that he can cast this turn, but he will be limited to his choice of one or the other next turn. Experimental Frenzy, of course, being the more powerful option, but brutal here for Seth.
Yeah, and look how brutal this is these next couple turns. The Bell Haunt is going to be basically a brick wall for this Pyromancer and gain Brad 3 life. And then Teferi lines up pretty well against whichever option Seth chooses for this turn. So,
jeez. Beautiful transition, or beautiful sequencing here from Brad Nelson, really just taking advantage of what's been given to him. And again, this time though, Seth Manfield says, okay, yeah, I got Experimental Frenzy. I can make that work. He's going to play it and just pass the turn back. So he loses the other exiled card, which was a Goblin Chain Whirler. But as you mentioned, Paul, what are the options now? We saw that he had Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and that's what he's going to play. And he can just send that Experimental Frenzy packing right now, and then he's got to try to find an answer for it in the next turn or two. But still, that helps out a lot. Gitu Lava Runner, the draw step here. But he's also got Fanatical Firebrand, so Teferi not long for this world.
And Oath of Kaya sitting around just kind of being annoying too,
Yeah.
There's, a really tough spot for Seth because he has to get Teferi off the battlefield. At the same time, Brad has that 3/4 creature, which is just so brutal, and another copy of Teferi coming for Brad. So really just, rocking a hard place here for Seth Manfield.
Yeah, Basilica Bellhunt effectively acting as a 3-for-1 in this matchup. Really, really annoying. And when Seth packs a full 4 copies of it in his main deck, you know what he was thinking about when he put this list together.
Mm-hmm. And maybe if you had Brad down to 5 or 6 right now, it'd be kind of interesting. But at 9, there's just not really kind of a sequence of things, that Seth can do to get himself out of this.
Yeah, we know he's going to draw Experimental Frenzy next turn and try to go off with it or whatever, but it's just there's so much time here for Brad to set up.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the Frenzy. That's going to go on the stack, and it will resolve. So let's see what he can find. First things first, Gitu Lava Runner, Mountain? No, he found a Steamkin on top. So he's just going to have to pass the turn back. And now there's Thought Erasure off the top of the library here for Nelson, which he can use to, surveil 1 and get a 1/1. Even though Seth is empty-handed at this point, still some Val.
Yeah, and this is going to let him know, do I want to use Teferi's Mind, his ability to tuck that Experimental Frenzy and play a second Teferi, or do I want to uptick my Teferi because maybe Thought Erasure finds me something really powerful on the top of my library? Looks like he's going to go for the former play, and getting the advantage from the Thought Erasure Surveil is what's allowing Brad to do this play with confidence. Oh, interesting. So he likes not to to play the second copy of Teferi and plus it and make another token, which is a little bit surprising to me. But I guess he's figuring the only way that he can lose this game is just letting an experimental frenzy stay on the battlefield. So he just wants to keep as many quote unquote tucks or minus abilities kind of in the
holster.
In the holster,
Yeah, that makes sense. And now he's really going off. He can double Planeswalker this turn with Narset, Part of Veils, and Teferi, Time Raveler. And this is the turn where if you're sitting in Seth Manfield's seat, you start to go, okay, I'm definitely losing now. There was still maybe a slim chance over the last couple of turns to put together some unlikely push, but now this is getting just ridiculous here. If you're sitting in Nelson's seat, he gets to return Oath of Kaya to his hand thanks to Teferi hitting the battlefield, recast it, kill the runaway Steamkin, go up to 12, still have Oath of Kaya on the battlefield, and yeah, Narset too. Why not just have all of it?
I think this is an infinite loop. I haven't done I'm not sure about the exact math here, but
I don't think this game will go on for infinite though, Paul.
No.
I think it's maybe a draw step away here from Seth Manfield saying, okay, so what are my outs, and recognizing that there are none at this point.
The interesting thing is that Brad's deck doesn't close very quickly. He's not going to be able to attack for huge chunks of damage. He's going to kind of keep grinding Seth into oblivion. So there's not going to be like a clear point where Seth says, I want out, but he doesn't have any equity remaining in the game. There's no way for him to actually come back and win.
Right. The Ishino Pyromancer was the draw step, with Experimental Frenzy being the next card. And yeah, I think that same exact conclusion that you just came to there, Paul. Seth says, good game, and he's going to scoop it up. So that is game number 1 going to Brad Nelson. And I mean, at least just from the brief look we got at the sideboards before, it doesn't seem like it's getting any better here for Manfield.
Yeah, the problem with using cards like Lava Coil is that you're often, or any sort of removal spells against a mid-range deck against Brad, is that you're relying on a very specific parlay of things happening. You both have to have pressure out. The Lava Coil has to kill their only blocker or their only way to gain advantage, like Thief of Sandy or Hero Precinct 1, and you need to be kind of on the offensive in a situation in which your opponent drew those cards, not the Planeswalker and removal draws. So, and even if all of that works out, sometimes a card like Basilica Bellhaunt, by making you discard a card and gaining 3 life, is still providing residual advantage. So you're down a card. So, using the removal spells, I mean, you need to have them, I guess, because otherwise you just, like that game, you can't get through a 3/4. But just structurally, the red cards just do not match up very well against Brad's deck. And I think specifically we saw the power of Basilica Bellhaunt. That's just something that Brad's elected to play that's so powerful against red.
Yeah, he only played 1 in that first game, but the life gain plus the 4 toughness blocker, it just sat on the battlefield and just held off the entire board for 2 turns in a row. And you can't give this deck that much time.
Right, we talk about the concept called virtual card advantage in Magic sometimes, when one card of yours is able to brick wall or to blank several of your opponent's cards or resources. It's not like you're just throwing cards in their graveyard, but since they're functionally useless resources, it's just such a strong concept, and we saw Brad kind of leveraging that to the max there. So super impressive from his deck.
By the way, I loved what Seth did there. I don't know if you saw this, but he did like a tabletop style. He just brought all of his cards into the main deck and then went through and took them out one at a time, which is something you'll see people do on tabletop so that they can conceal if or how much they've actually sideboarded. But also, it's just kind of an interesting look on Arena as well. So is this a good opener here for Seth? That's the first question.
It's a bad opener, but it's a clear plan. At least he knows what he's doing. This hand he's the control deck, basically. I'm saying I'm going to use my removal spells, Planeswalkers, drop Experimental Frenzy, and then ride that to town. It's not one of those kind of tweener hands that's not sure exactly whether it's playing offense or defense. The problem, if he doesn't find land, it doesn't do anything.
Right. Also, Brad is going to get a lot of information here thanks to Thought Erasure, and we're probably going to see a similar pattern to the one we did before. Now, Brad does have a little more leeway here to take something other than Experimental Frenzy, given the mana situation for Manfield. I'm curious to see what he does.
And the Disbark in his hand, right? So, Tibalt would be pretty attractive, I think, to me, as maybe the biggest threat on the table. A lot of burn spells in Seth's hand, so Tibalt combined with all that burn seems pretty annoying. But I think Brad is just really happy to see this hand.
Okay. He still took the Frenzy, though. He knows what this matchup is about. Yep. He does not care about any of the other cards except for Experimental Frenzy.
Yep, and I think that Cry of the Carnarium he has in his hand is making him think, okay, maybe I can just fight through this Tibalt that way.
Yeah, because, ultimately, Tibalt's, puts out 2/1/1 Devils.
Right.
It's not exactly the hammer blow, right? The static ability is pretty annoying when you are trying to leverage some of your cards to gain life, but, I think Brad knows that he he can fight through that. By the way, the draw steps haven't been particularly kind here to Manfield. He finds a fight with fire, which is a necessary evil against cards like this, but not really what he wanted to draw.
And now the clock is ticking. The Basilica Bellhaunt is going to give Brad an incredible amount of time. It's going to take one of Seth's resources. It's going to provide an effective blocker. It's probably going to require, Seth to use a removal spell like Lava Coil. And now basically the clock is ticking. Can Seth draw out of this early game problem before Brad finds one of his repetitive advantage generators, a Planeswalker or something of that nature? If he can, we have a game. If Brad able to just draw the fairy off the top, then this thing is going to get out of control.
So here's Lava Coil and the land off the top of the library as well for Seth Manfield. So things starting to come around a little bit for him here. He finally gets in for his first damage of the game, which is reduce Brad Nelson from 23 to 21. And another Bell Hunt. Brad Nelson is bringing the heat here. Second Bell Hunt in a row. And that is going to be extremely difficult now for Seth Manfield. You talked about that virtual card advantage. It is flowing very much in Brad Nelson's direction here. The Bard singing his song.
Yeah, he's actually getting regular card advantage, getting virtual card advantage. He's getting all kinds of card advantage.
Yeah.
And, life. It's just whatever he really wants, and an absolutely brutal draw. You can think of that card in terms of turns. How many turns is that going to buy him? Because again, what he's really trying to do is find one of his haymakers, his big bazookas, to start putting the game out of reach the way Game 1 went. Basilica Bellhaunt could gain him as many as 3 or 4 extra draw steps in this game. And it's just an absolutely brutal spell. I mean, he may even be able to start attacking if he finds another creature. So, which is just an absolutely crazy thing for this type of matchup.
Here's the fight with fire, again, used to kill cards like Basilica Bellhaunt and Lyra Dawnbringer, and he's just got to kind of suck it up and keep one for wanting from his perspective, but he's losing a card, all the life is going away, and things are getting very difficult now for Seth Manfield. Brad Nelson has been running the show here in the MPL in his division, the Emerald division, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down here. Game 1 was not close. Ooh, hello. Chandra Fire Artisan off the top of the library. Now he can start to kind of work through the answers that Nelson has. Maybe get himself a little value on the way. It looks like he's going to kick things off, though, with Tybalt Rakish Instigator instead. Now he's got 3 power on the board, and Brad, oh, hello, Lyra Dawnbringer off the top of the library, one of the most powerful options in his entire deck for this matchup.
Yeah, we talked about buying time for haymakers. Well, that is a haymaker against mono red. Now, Tybalt's static ability, your opponent's can't gain life, is pretty relevant, and what Brad's going to want to do is use this Cry of the Carnarium to deal with all the creature threats, then drop the Lyra, attack the Tybalt, and then get to work on Seth's life total.
That's right. So no play there at all from Nelson. He wants to entice Seth into using Tybalt's other ability, or using his ability again, I should say, so that he can get full value. And look at this. Seth Manfield is having none of it. He just passes the turn back. That is, of course, going to open the door now for Nelson to use Despark to take down Chandra. But that Tybalt is still on the battlefield. Thank you very much. And Brad says, okay, you called. I didn't have it. That's fine. I'm just going to play out Lyra. But the truth is that one hit from Lyra against Tybalt, and then boom, she can start going to work on the life total. And the clock is very short now for Seth Manfield. He needs to find an answer for Lyra, and he's already used up a few of them. We saw the fight with fire, and then also a lava coil in conjunction with lightning strike in his hand would have done it as well. So he needs to find another burn spell.
Right, for Seth to meaningfully continue in this game, yeah, he needs to draw another burn spell, and it needs to be next turn. Mm-hmm. I think kind of an impressive play that might get lost here in this game was not using Tybalt last turn.
Yeah, it was great.
Using the information of what Brad took with that Thought Erasure earlier, when it made so much sense to take the Tybalt, and Brad chose to take the Experimental Frenzy, which seemed less threatening at the time. I wonder if Seth was able to work that through, just something that the great players kind of think about over the course of a longer game.
Yeah, such a smart play. And also, I have to give Brad props too, because it was like, okay, I'm going to give you a chance to step into this. But once he didn't, he's like, okay, fine, here's Lyra. Like, I'm not going to get cute and try to, wait around or do something silly. All right, there's Light Up the Stage. That was a big draw there for Seth, because he can use that in conjunction with his combat step here to try to dig for that second removal spell.
Yep, and we noticed that Seth does eventually use the Tybalt for 2 reasons. Number one, it was going to die to the attack from Lyra, so it's good to get some value out of it anyway. And then second, he realizes that if Brad were to play something like Cry of the Carnarium, that's going to give him the window to Lightning Strike Lyra, and I think he's perfectly happy with that exchange. He would gladly trade all of his cards in hand and everything on the battlefield to remove Lyra from the table.
Yes, that would give him at least a chance to top deck one of his 4-mana spells and start to take over the game. In the meantime, he wants to maximize damage, so he's actually going to play the G2 Lava Runner first because he knows he can still hit any of his burn spells and kill Lyra at least by next turn. And unfortunately, he did not. He hit Chandra, Fire Artisan, and Viashino Pyromancer, and he's not even going to cast a Pyromancer here, Paul.
Yeah, at this point, you just are playing with the assumption that he knows the Cry of the Carnarium's in Brad's hand, right?
He's played like it.
That's how he's playing the game. He just wants to leave this Lightning Strike up. Now, unfortunately for him, the Lightning Strike is also kind of face up. He may know about it from that earlier.
He does.
He does. Okay, yeah. So,
but this is, of course, a devastating sequence here. As Lyra Dawnbringer has now connected in the air. And look at this, 14 life. And the life total, of course, of Seth is going to start plummeting as well. So, again, he has been under pressure for the duration of this entire game to keep finding things. And Seth so far has, but he is running out of time very quickly here. Is it time for the Cry of the Carnarium? I mean, this looks beautiful. Just wipe the board, right?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he now has a follow-up play with it would indicate that, it's definitely a decent time for it.
But he does open himself up to Lightning Strike, though, right?
Yes.
So he knows he's giving up Lyra by making this play.
Well,
right?
Can he use Tyrant Scorn? I mean, he may...
Oh, just bounce it?
Yeah, he may want to do that, or he may want to play Teferi.
He's going to use Tyrant Scorn,
Wow, he is going to do it.
Yeah, I think he just says, why not both? And of course, if you're sitting in Seth's seat, you probably figured that something along those lines was coming, just because it's unlikely that you're going to just give up your Lyra. I mean, it still dominated that board even from that step. Nice! Chandra hits the battlefield and hits the land to cast the exiled Viashino Pyromancer. Not bad, but again, the real issue here is, once again, Lyra Dawnbringer back on the battlefield, and now he's got to find it. There's Lava Coil. He still has activation from Chandra. Can he find another? Oh, it's Fight with Fire off the top. And that is going to give him that answer for Lyra Dawnbringer. And this game plan from Nelson looks like it may be falling apart.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, what a turn of events. Now all of a sudden, is this Seth Manfield in the driver's seat? All of a sudden, I mean, it looks like
it from here. I mean, he's got a Teferi. There's
Oh,
Despark.
wow. That's huge here, because now he can Teferi, protect itself, and still have the Disbark for the Chandra. So that's just literally, I think, one of the best draws he could have had in this spot. And oh my gosh, he draws Thought Erasure. He can kind of do it all.
Wow, what a big swing back in Brad Nelson's direction now. Still, this is going to be something. There's 4 power on the battlefield.
Yep. But that's a lot of selection, right? The Thought Erasure surveils, Teferi draws him additional cards. He's going to get 2 more cards next turn. That's a lot of cards to find an answer for these Pyromancers.
But it is a 2-turn clock, at least currently on the battlefield. And look at this, Direfleet Daredevil is the draw step now for Seth Manfield, so he has an answer now. Well, let's see what he takes. I assume he's just going to take care of Teferi with D-Spark.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Oh, man, this game has gotten really good. And all of a sudden, Brad Nelson now needs to try to rip another Cry of the Carnarium. Ooh, Oath of Kai is not bad either. That'll bump him back up to 7 and take out the Direfleet Daredevil, so that buys him at least a turn. And there's another Direfleet Daredevil. Now, what are the attractive options here? There don't seem to be any at this point.
He could elect to just cast it and cast Thought Erasure in order to just surveil one.
And get the 2 power on the battlefield.
The question is that more valuable than leaving it up for next turn to be able to maybe cast a Spark or Tyrant Scorn?
He has lethal on the battlefield now.
Yep. I'm pretty tempted to want to maybe surveil in this spot, especially because it provides a third threat. Right now your lethal damage falls apart to 1 removal spell, but
ooh, he's going to risk it though. Oh, but it's an isolated chapel off the top of the library, and Seth Manfield won a game with Mono Red where he took hits from Lyra Dawnbringer and faced down multiple copies of Basilica Bellhunt. No big deal. That was incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredibly impressive play there from Seth. And I think that, if Brad could go back and maybe rather than spending a whole turn to bounce his own Lyra, have just played Teferi in that situation, he might have been a little bit happier. But that's tough. I mean, you think to yourself, if I can just keep Lyra on the battlefield, I've already, no pun intended, fought through one of the fight with fires in Seth's deck. So he only had one fight with fire left to be able to kill Lyra cleanly. So his play is certainly defensible, and it just didn't work out because he found that one clean answer.
Ooh, that was a nice one.
It was beautiful. I mean,
it was insane.
Everything Seth did that game in order to manipulate him to that spot. I mean, people talk about finding those winning those 1%ers, when everything kind of aligns. But if you don't put yourself in the position to be able to draw those cards, you never get to tell that story. And that's why he's here.
All right, deep breath. Everybody at home, we've got one more game to bring you
for
here
5-0
from our opening match
this is good.
in the Emerald Division here. This is Seth Manfield versus Brad Nelson, and these guys are near the top of the Emerald Division, and well, they're fighting for a lot here. The chance to really control their destiny, as you put it, Paul, going into the last week here in our first run here at the MPL Weekly event. So that does not look like a keep.
Yeah, Brad's hand is okay. Notably, it lacks a copy of Plains, Island, or Swamp, or any multicolored land therein.
That's
so he has
tap, tap.
all tap lands, which is pretty ugly against red, but not really a hand you're really interested in mulliganing because it has all 3 colors of mana and a nice curve. Seth forced to mulligan with just 1 land and too high of a curve.
Yeah. Okay. Not the worst opener here with double mountain, a lava runner, a lava coil, another lava coil, and a Chandra Fire Artisan. He also elects to keep the Tybalt on top of his library, which looks a little risky from here just because he does need that 3rd land as well, but he figures it's important in the matchup, I'm assuming. Tap land, though, and there's that mountain right off the top of the library, so playing perfectly as always. Yep. This means no play for the turn, though, but now Brad can finally start casting spells. And by the way, his draw has been 5 tap lands now.
Yeah, we talked about the mana base maybe being an issue, and here it certainly appears to be. Yeah. I think what we saw with that Scry decision is now coming to really fruition here, is that Seth's more worried about mana flooding than anything else, especially knowing that Brad has left in his discard in the form of Thought Erasure. And so he wants to make sure he has enough of these threats that are difficult for Brad to deal with, that 1 Thought Erasure or 1 removal spell is not going to kind of leave him without the attack.
Yeah, smart play there. He's going to get in for another 1 point of damage, knock Brad down to 18, but no play for the turn after hitting his 4th land off the top of the library. He's got 3 on the battlefield. Next turn, it could be Chandra Clock, so that's not the worst case there for Seth. On the other side, it's Narset Parter of Veils hitting the battlefield here for Brad. This is turn 4, though, and again, he's just playing off curve this entire game. He's cast a 2-drop on turn 3 and now a 3-drop on turn 4. Here's land number 4, and the way is clear for Chandra Fire Artisan to hit the battlefield. And Chandra plays nice with Narset, right?
Yes, it does play nice against Narset, and very importantly, we don't see either an untapped land or a clean answer. Pause.
Right, you didn't even have a syllable out of your mouth, and Ixalan's Binding came off the top of the library there for Brad.
And we'd mentioned Ixalan's Binding in the pregame as a sideboard card that he would want in his deck against things like Chandra and Experimental Frenzy. You put cards in your deck because you want to draw them in situations like this.
That's how this game works, as I'm sure you've had to explain to a lot of your opponents over the years after complaining that you top decked exactly what you needed. There is tap land number 5, and this draw has fallen very flat here for Seth Manfield. He is down to just a 1-2 on the battlefield. Sure, he has a pair of lava coils, but if you look at the hand from Nelson, he just doesn't have any targets for him. Yeah, there is a Hero of Precinct 1 hiding in there, but the problem is that Brad knows about both lava coils, so he's just like, sure, I'm going to play Teferi, I'm going to play Narset, I'm not even going to let you use those lava coils at all. And now Teferi's facing down minimal pressure here, just like you2 Lava Runner, and another mountain off the top of the library for Seth Manfield puts him very far behind the, probably the best Planeswalker in Standard over the last, since it's come out. Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, has really dominated the scene.
Do you remember when Seth topped that Tybalt and we thought he might not have enough lands this game?
I do.
I'm not concerned that he's going to have enough lands this game anymore.
That concern has dissipated quite cleanly here. Another plus from Teferi after Teferi takes 1 from the Lava Runner means that once again, nothing left, and it looks like Brad just wants to start getting through his library here. He's just going to cast the Thought Erasure. He knows he's taking away 1 copy of Lava Coil. And look at this Basilica Bell Haunt now off of that Teferi. Leaves Seth with just Lava Coil in hand. He's probably happy he finally found a target for that thing. But yeah, this cannot be a great way to go here for Seth Manfield, especially with the knowledge that we have, which is that Brad has got 4 spells in hand at this point.
Yeah, and this is one of those times where you're watching the red deck play against mid-range or control. Things are really starting to fall apart for the red deck, as they often do, in the game. And then, okay, next step, let me look at that life total. Let's see where they got them. We mentioned earlier, last game he had him down to about 8 or 9 in this spot and was able to force through damage before Brad drew out of it. Now, again, unfortunately, he's only gotten him down to 20, and that's not going to be. It's going to be hard to just squeeze through 20 damage without Brad checking. So
that is going to be a tough sell. So we're going to see Hero of Precinct 1 followed by Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, plus Teferi, draw a card, untap some lands, and pass the turn back. Lava Coil off the top of the library does let Seth have an answer for Hero of Precinct 1, but with Narset Parter of Veils, another Time Raveler, another Hero of Dominaria, and now Tyrant Scorn killing the only threat left on the other side. No way that Seth can pull off this comeback. Look, he had the unlikely comeback last time, but come on, Brad's at 20 this time. There's no way. And remember, Chandra's not even an out at this point for Seth. So even his best cards off the top of the library aren't that good now.
This is when, if you're playing in your local friend group, you have to have a no scooping rule so that you can just, if you're Esper midrange deck, you can play with all your planeswalkers and keep activating them. And because it might take Brad a while to actually deal 20 damage, and it's really fun to just sit there with all those planeswalkers out.
Hey, that has to be the best possible option now for Seth. He finds Experimental Frenzy Bit, as we've seen in Standard and also earlier today. Little T in combination with Thought Erasure is just devastating. Takes that out of his hand during his draw step, and this is just demoralizing at this point. This really is a question of, like, this is Rocky, right? Like, how much more can you possibly take in the ring if you're Seth Manfield? Because you don't get an award for going the distance against Brad.
Right.
He's going to win this one either way.
They could stop it now, and we could just have a decision, but I think that he's going to go for the full TKO. At some point, though, you do want to say, like, don't just stay in your corner. Don't come out for the next round.
Right, right. You got a career ahead of you here,
exactly.
kid. You don't want to take too many hits.
And this, I think, Brad Nelson, in terms of Standard, right? To further the analogy, a lot of these players are mixed combat sports people, right? They're playing all sorts of formats. Brad is a boxer. This Standard is him, and we are absolutely in his wheelhouse, playing his most preferred format. He is arguably, I think maybe inarguably, the best Standard player of the last 10 years, and on his way to 5-0.
And that turns out the knockout blow with, he's got to kind of take a deep breath, make a sandwich, have some iced tea, and get back to business here, because this is a much better matchup than the one that he just faced against Brad. Let's take a look at what Matt Nass is working with on the bottom. You said he was hoping for a growth spiral to kick things off. He got that.
Well, I asked for a growth spiral and a bad draw, and I see Seth Manfield on 5 cards. So I'm thinking we're well on the way, if you're a Matt Nass fan, to doing kind of exactly what he wants.
Hinterland Harbor tapped kicks things off now for Nass, but he drew another copy of Growth Spiral. He does face down a runaway Steamkin here, though, but he has a reasonable answer for it with Blink of an Eye, probably next turn. He's going to pass a turn back here, though, and see if Seth has one of those draws where he can cast multiple spells and get that Steamkin up to a respectable rate, and it does look like he's only got the 1 extra copy, so it's just 2 damage. Nass, does he take it, or does he to cast his Growth Spiral? Yeah, that's what he's going to do. Zoop. You can see if he can find another land as well. Well, it's another Nexus of Fate, and he does find that land off the top of the library, though. He's looking at casting Jadelight Ranger here as just a good blocker, potentially, for these Steamkins.
Yeah, a little temptation to play Growth Spiral, try to hit untapped green mana and do it all, but that's pretty greedy.
No, a lot of temptation.
Would have worked out.
A lot of temptation.
This is one of those decks, one of those games, I should say, rather, where if you're playing the Simic Nexus deck and you're maybe practicing at home against your friends and your opponent's mulligan to 5 and not done anything really, and you have your kind of perfect Growth Spiral draw with all of your best cards, when you lose those games, that's the time to maybe say, okay, I'm done with this matchup. Give me one of those Esper decks. You know?
Yeah. Anybody have Esper sleeved up? Because I'm ready to practice that matchup now. So as it turns out, Manfield, though, did curve right into Experimental Frenzy. And while he's low on resources, that is a type of card that can catch him right back up. Now, Tamiyo, Collector of Tales off the top of the library, and a lot of options for Nass, who has another copy of Jadelight Ranger and another Growth Spiral with 2 lands in his hand, too. There's another one. So he can play that and then play his land for the turn. That gives him 4 mana. So now his choice is either leave up Blink of an Eye or cast Tamiyo or Jadelight Ranger.
Strong temptation to cast that blink of an eye here, just to not let your opponent go crazy with Experimental Frenzy next turn. But you also, when you start chaining Nexus of Fates, it's not that great if you don't have a board presence down. So
Right.
there's definitely an argument to be made for both cards. He really wants to dig to try to find Hydroid Krasis.
Right, of course.
That's really going to be the key for him, kind of pressing his advantage here.
Looks like he's decided to kick Blink of an Eye. Ooh, on the Runaway Steamkin. Now, he can take advantage of the fact that the Experimental Frenzy kind of keeps that stuck in your hand. It's acting as a removal spell here in this situation. But, letting your opponent untap with a Frenzy and 4 lands minimum can get kind of awkward.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that play, to be honest with you, Marshall. I think that I get the temptation. It's kind of cute that you strand that Steamkin in his hand, but because he has Frenzy out and another Steamkin already in play, you're getting limited value out of that blink it for an eye. So, yeah. And it looks like he's getting, pretty maximally punished for it here as Seth is just kind of going off.
Yeah, and but this is the threat, right? They have 1 copy of Steamkin, a few lands, and an Experimental Frenzy, and if you've played Standard much at all, you know how badly this can go for you. They can chain together a lot more cards than you would expect from a red-only deck. You don't think of those decks as the type of decks that can do this, but with Runaway Steamkin particularly, if you hit a nice run of spells off the top with that Frenzy, it can get pretty ugly.
Looks like it's deciding what to do with the shock. I mean, why go right to the face, huh? Interesting.
He didn't kill the Ranger. Down to 11 goes Matt Nass.
Maybe he's thinking that at some point, while you're chaining through your library, you're going to find that Incidental Chain Whirler, and it's more efficient to just kill the Jaylight Ranger using the triggered ability rather than using shock.
He also had Wizard's Lightning available there too, so he's kind of just going off. And there's also a Lightning Strike off of the light up the stage. Now he can cast that. No, not quite yet. So what is he thinking about playing here? The Wizard's Lightning. And now that does give him actually access to the Lightning Strike, doesn't it?
Yep. The interesting thing here, though, is that the Jadelight Ranger being able to block Runaway Steamkin might just be more effective than the
2 damage.
Than the 2 damage from shock, yeah.
For sure. It would have been 2 extra damage. So now he's going to use a Lightning Strike to kill it, and it looks like he had a land drop in there somewhere as well, because that Steamkin still on 4 has him down to 1, and that was an absolute unmitigated disaster for Matt Nass. Boy, he just sort of left that door open, and Seth said, "I'm coming over for pizza."
Yeah.
Knocked that door right down, because that was not a good outcome there for Nass, and he might be regretting not bouncing that Frenzy with the Blink of an Eye.
Yeah, mono red. I mean, really doesn't give you a lot of chance to kind of mess around, and set up your kind of fun combos and things like that. And if there's one thing Matt loves, it's setting up a really fun combo.
Mm-hmm. Now he's dead on board. Let's see, does he have any options though? So he can play Nissa and give him Tamiyo mana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, pretty easily. He'll have quite a bit of mana thanks to Nissa, actually, so not even close.
Fortunately, he's 1 short, it looks like. Has he played a land this turn? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you can actually.
I believe he has.
Okay,
No, I'm wrong. He has not.
If he's not played a land at this turn, then he can produce for
8 mana.
10 mana with the untap ability. So,
right.
So could find. No, still Tamayo plus Nexus is not enough. He still does not have enough for
11,
that. So
yeah.
I think we're going to find him, unfortunately, having to say go into another active Frenzy and very likely not living.
Here's Tamiyo, Collector of Tales, hitting the battlefield. That, of course, acts as a regrowth. You can get a card back from your graveyard, though. Is there anything worth doing here?
Well, I'm not sure if I understand exactly what's going on here. So
there is a Blink of an Eye.
Yeah, because he has to get back Blink of an Eye now, right? I mean, if he doesn't, then...
Well, then what happens?
Well, he's going to try to blink the Runaway Steamkin, I would imagine.
I see.
And then just hope to get very lucky with Experimental Frenzy this next turn.
I mean, is there an argument to just getting Jadelight Ranger and similarly hoping to get lucky? He would have 2 blockers in that scenario.
Well, I think that either way, your next turn is going to be, you're going to need Seth to chain through quite a bunch of garbage on the top of his library.
He's going to need to go like land,
Yeah.
realistically, yeah.
And Steamkin is
your biggest
pretty
threat.
annoying, yeah.
Okay, well, he found a way to do it all here. So thanks to the abundance of mana, he was able to cast Jade Light Ranger and Blink of an Eye, and there really needs to be 2 mountains on top of the library here in most scenarios. And that's not a mountain. Lightning Strike off the top is going to be Seth Manfield finishing things up, but really it came back to the turn prior. You saw how close Matt actually got on that turn from being able to go off. He cast 2 Nexuses. He had the 2 Planeswalkers rolling. If he gets to untap from that step, there was another Nexus waiting for him, and he could have really completely gone off. But the problem, of course, is that he left that door open just ever so briefly, just a little 1-turn window, and that cost him like 12 life or something.
Yeah, but now, Marshall, here come the Arboreal Grazers.
Oh.
So, things are business is really going to start to pick up here in the MPL as, again, mostly a card you want to use in booster draft, as you know.
No, we're not. You can't do this, Paul. I don't want my name associated with that card in any capacity.
Yeah.
Did you know it has reach?
I did know that. Yes.
That's the hard sell I get from people. No, the card's actually good because I'm like, okay, give it to me. Did you know it had reach?
Well,
yes, I knew it had reach.
I mean, if you've ever done a beta booster draft, which I'm sure you have, then you have to play your share of Wall of Woods. It's like there's just not that many playables.
Strictly better.
Yep.
I have covered a beta booster draft.
Okay.
I've never done one.
Okay, nice. I'm same here.
I would love to do one. We should get that together.
All right.
Yeah. We should do that.
Have to win in a Mythic Championship before I can afford to do a beta booster draft.
Yeah. You should do that too.
I'm going to work on it.
Yeah.
All right, so again, we talked about what Seth was going to do post-sideboard, and it's not necessarily obvious how much removal he wants.
Right.
I think, really you kind of just want to be proactive. You want to do what he did, curve out, put a Frenzy on the battlefield, and end the game.
Yeah.
We do see him leaving Chandra in.
Yeah, it looks like he brought in 2 War Bosses and replaced some Firebrands.
Yeah, and that's, the mid-rangeization of Standard has made decks extremely difficult to sideboard against. It's not always clear, is your opponent combo? Are they mid-range? What exactly are they doing?
Mid-rangification?
Yeah. Is that not
Love
a word?
That.
Okay.
No, that is great.
Okay.
Totally using that one. All right, so here we go. We're all set for game number 2 between Matt Nass and Seth Manfield. No play for Seth just yet, and Matt Nass, of course, has Thorn Lieutenant basically for this reason. It doesn't die to shock. So he's going to play that. And here's Runaway Steamkin on turn number 2 for Manfield. Passes the turn back, and we're going to see Jade Light Ranger on turn 3 here for Nass.
It looks like Matt has basically upgraded his deck into a draft deck, from what he had before. like a really good-looking draft deck to me.
Yeah, he just put a Grazer in the graveyard. He wants to find lands. But yeah, he pack one, pick one, biogenic ooze and built around it seems.
Exactly. No more of that, I'm going to try to ramp up and then cast a 7-mana Time Walk. I'm actually just going to try to beat you up.
Yeah, and he's going to be conservative here. He knows that when he does get ahead in this game, winning the game will be pretty trivial from that point. So the incidental 2 points of damage from Thorn Lieutenant isn't worth the risk of taking a big hit from the Runaway Steamkin coming back the other direction. So he's just going to hold back. This is Steamkin number 2, though. Things are starting to get scary already here from Seth Manfield's perspective. Thankfully for Matt Nass, he did put those 2 non-lands into the graveyard off of the Jade Light Ranger, and that did clear the way for a breeding pool off the top of the library. Unfortunately for him, he isn't quite at the point of actually casting Biogenic Ooze just yet. So what is the game plan? It looks like he could play Thrashing Brontodon and Llanowar Elves, or leave up Blink of an Eye, and he's gone for that.
Yeah, he wants to use Blink of an Eye on Runaway Steamkin, which prevent it from getting a 3rd counter. He also wants to use that to gain him the 5th land that he needs to be able to cast Biogenic Ooze. The perfect sequencing for him would be kind of Seth going for it, trying to go for some kind of a crazy big turn, and then tapping out in such a way that Biogenic Ooze is able to trigger on Matt's next end step.
Okay, well, this does look like the beginning of Seth Manfield kind of going for it. He's going to shock the 3 toughness Jade Light Ranger.
Yep.
Which indicates that there's more damage coming. In this case, it's going to be a Goblin Chain Whirler. And Matt is probably going to be pretty happy that he's left up that Blink of an Eye to not take just a huge amount of damage here. And even as it sits, he's still taking a pretty good whack.
Yeah, and it's actually going to work out okay for Matt.
Mm-hmm.
he's going to be able to blink the runaway steamkin that was threatening to grow into 3 counters, which is going to significantly reduce Seth Manfield's clock. And if he is able to find that land, that Biogenic Ooze is going to get to pop off for a token. So it certainly doesn't put him in a great spot. But all he's trying to do really is buy time until he can pop off a big Hydroid Krasis to take control of the game.
That's right. Of course, Matt being careful to use his bounce spell there at the right time. He did not let that counter get on the Steamkin, and it's another Jade Light Ranger off the top of the library here for Matt Nass. So he can immediately replace it, but no, he's going to take the safer option and go for the 3/4 Thrashing Brontodon, old Thrashy B, to block the Chain Whirler. And currently the Steamkin, though, that isn't realistically going to happen.
Unfortunately, we're in the rarest of situations here where the green deck's creatures actually don't effectively combat the red deck's creatures. Like they're not big enough. It's like the craziest thing, So, he really wanted to find a land that turn, obviously, to play the Ooze. Failing that, he continues playing out his strong curve draft deck, but it's unfortunately, Seth's, essentially playing a combo deck at this point, and has the whole world in his hand.
Yeah, really tough spot here for Matt Nass. It looks like he's stable if you just snapshot the board right now, but of course that is not going to be the case when combat happens, and things are going to get pretty difficult here for Nass.
There's 2 competing interests that Seth's thinking about. Number 1 is obviously pressing his advantage and putting something like Chandra onto the battlefield. The second is he would love to be able to get that Lanhor Elves off the... That's a good way to do it. That's the way to do it.
You are just on fire today, Paul. Every time you say something, it just happens. He wants to get the Lanhor Elves off the battlefield. Well, how about a shock off of Chandra? And let's not forget that he has the land to do that right now, but also that Steam can add 3 red mana to his mana pool, and he can kind of cycle back up. In the meantime, though, he's just going to attack with Goblin Chain Whirler, which obviously looks a little suspicious, into the Thrashing Brontodon. But Matt says, sure. Oh, he's going to go for the triple block here. Oh, cancel that order.
I like that we're talking about Seth having to choose between things, and then, don't cheat yourself. Treat yourself. Get it all. You know what I mean? You can, you can get a lightning strike to make the combat nightmare. You can have shock. Do whatever you want.
And have all of it. Yeah.
You see Matt kind of scrolling around the screen. I would be throwing my mouse at this point. And my mouse is on a cord, so it wouldn't even go anywhere.
Yeah, that's
you know what
right.
I mean? It's
Keyboard's not safe in Paul Rietzel's vicinity. But this Chain Whirler is going to wreak havoc on the board thanks to the 2 burn spells that Seth Manfield has available to him in the form of Shock and Lightning Strike. And let's see how he wants to proceed from here.
Well, he can do it all, right? He can go Lightning Strike the Thrashing Brontodon, first strike it and the 1/1/1, and then Shock and the Thorn Lieutenant to finish it off. So he can actually, if he wants to, he could finish off all of Matt's creatures and leave him with just insect token.
Yeah, it looks like he's let first strike damage happen. So Thrashy took the 3 is down to 1, and now we see Runaway Stim can cash in those counters for 3 red mana. First of which is going to go into Shock. That's going to finish off Thrashing Brontodon. He does still need to take care of one of these other creatures, or he will lose his Chain Whirler, though. So
possibly a little bit of a misstep there, I think. Maybe he would have wanted to Lightning Strike the Brontodon before first strike damage.
Yes, because now the Thorn Lieutenant is still on the battlefield. Here's Jade Light Ranger, though, and some lands for Matt Nass? Nope. This one, there's a land. It's a Hinterland Harbor as well. The perfect land for Matt that allows him to cast Incubation Druid this turn. And yeah, look at that. The Thorn Lieutenant still being on the battlefield could matter here as well. Here's Chandra.
Yeah, to be fair, when you're in Seth's spot, maybe he's just being sporting. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to leave you with something,
This matchup did not look good for Matt Nass. His draws have not fully cooperated, although in game 1 he did get to kind of do his thing. But again, we mentioned it. He left the door open that one turn, and Manfield took full advantage. And this time, it's kind of played out like you'd think it would. A reasonable curve out for Manfield has just given Matt Nass fits, and he hasn't been able to hit his lands when he wanted to, and that he's been punished for that as well. Well, here they come, a 4/4 Steamkin and a Chain Whirler. That's a 3/3. So Matt Nass is just going to keep trying to just run his way through. He knows what Manfield has, at least in that Lightning Strike. He's aware of it, right? No, I guess he's not. That's face down, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is actually very relevant. You know that again, that Thorn Lieutenant's still on the battlefield now, forcing him to use the lightning strike. He can't commit as much to the board, and these biogenic ooze, this biogenic ooze is gonna pop off for an additional token and
Interesting.
and start to grow it. So
and there's no more answers left for Manfield.
no more answers. So there's still a little bit of work for Seth Manfield to be done. Obviously, he has plenty of mana, 2 Runaway Steamkins, another Goblin Chain Whirler, and a Chandra on 6. So he has all the tools.
So it's not the worst case.
Not the worst case, but Matt's not 100% dead yet.
Let's see what he hits off of Chandra here. If it is a 3 damage burn spell, which it's not, it was a mountain, he could probably lock up the game right here. As it stands, if Matt can survive this turn and get that second ooze going, it gets really big really quick.
Yeah. The problem for him is that he is going to be forced to put at least one of his creatures into combat this turn, and still, if he doesn't put either the ooze or the ooze token into combat, that'll put him down to 2.
And Chandra's
Chandra's at 7. Yeah.
So it looks like this one may have run away from Matt Nass, as Seth Manfield was able to leverage those burn spells plus Chain Whirler and Runaway Steamkin in the middle part of this game to put a lot of pressure on Matt, force him into some blocks he didn't really want to make, and now he's in chump block mode at this point, facing down Chandra Fire Artisan, whose static ability actually is coming up super important here.
The bummer about Chandra's ultimate here is that we won't really get to see all those cards because
yes,
first
the damage will already be done. Yep.